Hi, it's really great to be with you. Thanks for joining me. I'm here with my friend Kirst, and we're going to talk today about chapter 2, Fatherless. Hi Kirst, really nice to see you.
Thanks, Lou.
So good to have you with us. So Kirst, if I may introduce you just briefly, just to say that you are a wonderful woman of God. You are training with the Church of England to be an ordinand. We have the joy of being at the same college each year, and it's lovely to hang out with you on Mondays when we can. And you are such a firecracker. You're so passionate about families and communities and serving your local area. I know you've got a passion for Uganda, and you have a particular passion for good quality home decor. Can you tell us a little bit about you, where you've come from, what God's done to date?
I grew up in a single parent family. My parents moved to Bath, had 3 kids. I was then number 4, very much not wanted, but on my dad's side. So by the age of 3, my dad was an alcoholic and pretty unkind to be around, and my parents separated. My dad had an affair with one of my mum's friends. They had more children. So life, particularly on my dad's side, was quite messy. I had contact with him until the age of 8, and he was verbally and physically abusive, and he would take a lot of time to sort of tell me how unloved I was, that no one would ever love me, that I wouldn't amount to anything, and delight in some of my other siblings, particularly my half siblings. And so that was kind of my upbringing until about the age of 8, when the courts then ruled we didn't have any more contact with each other, and I didn't see him until I was 18. And I'd love to say it didn't have an effect on my teenage years. It absolutely did. I kind of grew up just thinking that I wasn't really loved, actually. So it didn't really matter what I did, and could be quite reckless at times because it just didn't matter in my view. And then when I was 18, I had that magic moment of being like, I'm an adult, because that's what the world tells you. And I reached out to my dad without telling anybody and said, I'd really like to meet up with you for a coffee. So we did. And in that meeting, I just said to him, I would love to build a relationship with you, but it has to start from scratch. And I would love to get to know you. I really want you to play the role of a father in my life. That's been really absent for me. And my only condition to this is that you just don't drink on the day that I see you. And he just looked me dead in the eye and said, if it's a choice between alcohol or you, I will always choose alcohol. It will always win. And that was it. That was the last point of contact I had with my dad. It was the last time I saw him. He died 4 years ago now, and really sadly died of alcoholism, died all by himself, out of relationship. And I can kind of see the impact it's had on me as a person. I think for a long time, I just grew up really believing this lie that actually fundamentally I was unloved, that there would always come a point when people's love would stop. No matter what people said or did, that was what I believed. And that's kind of what I grew up really kind of holding on to, I guess, and actually just building as a foundation to my life.
Yeah, I mean, that is horrific, isn't it? It's just such a story of being sort of decimated emotionally, isn't it? Not just physically and not having a dad, but actually what that whole season and episode in your life has done to leave you feeling so void and feeling so depleted, and I think that's just so tragic. I mean, I know our stories are different, but the result's the same. You grow up feeling unloved, unwanted, yes, and sort of uncertain about how people are going to react to you. There's no strong male role models. That's a whole other conversation about then how you grow up as a woman and how you learn to be a woman without having that covering. It's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely. So hard. So hard. So yeah, you've shared all that, and I know that's really painful. So thank you so much, Kirst, for doing that. But in the book, I talked, and I really empathise what you're saying about this sense of feeling different, and in a relationship with God. I guess for you, that in your relationship with God, that has been transformational for you. And I talk about in the book an encounter I had at a conference where the Holy Spirit just took me out and just said, right, it's snotty, it's messy, but I just want to tell you that you are loved. And I was in my late 30s having this encounter, having lost my dad when I was really tiny, growing up under this cloud of who am I, what am I doing, and who am I trying to please, and still having this sense of dread about not being sure about who I really was and how to live freely. But in that moment, that sense I had was, oh, Abba Father, my spirit crying Abba Father, and finally connecting the dots on a piece of scripture you and I know so well, right? But actually for me it became my cry. It wasn't just something that I read in the textbook. And I wondered for you, have you had a similar encounter? Has yours been a momentary sort of chipping away at, or has it been more of an explosive moment?
Yeah, I think so. I grew up going to church, like we went to our local Anglican church, but I just didn't see people like me there, if I'm honest. Like I grew up in a council estate, single parent family, in a certain amount of poverty, and I didn't see me at church, and I really struggled with that. And at the front, people would always talk about, God is this loving father, and I just used to think, no, I don't want a father. Like I really don't. I've experienced that. It was not good. And I think like my friends' dads were really lovely, but I never connected with any of them. Like I was a bit of a tearaway, and there was this real place of lack, like you speak about. And I think for me, there were two moments when actually God broke through. One of them, I was age 15, sat on the balcony of the church. My mum was the church warden, and it's a service. And some of my friends from the estate had come up to the church. And I've no doubt as an adult, they were causing problems. Like, I don't doubt they were up to no good. But at the time, they were just my friends and they were me. And they were turned away, and they were told that, you can't behave like that here. You're not welcome, essentially. And in that moment, I'm sat on the balcony. I just cried out. And I don't know that I was fully crying out to God. I just remember crying out and saying, if they're not welcome here, then nor am I. And I'm done. Like, I'm out. And in that moment, I just heard this voice say to me, if you want to see change, you stay in it. And I just suddenly thought, I think I'm going to work for a church, but I didn't know what to do with that information. Anyway, I eventually left church, did the usual, got caught up I worked in the fashion industry, got caught up in that, got into a really unhealthy relationship, and really patterns of life just played out. Yeah. But a friend of mine invited me to go to church with her one week, and I went. And in that moment, I walked through the doors of the church and I felt like I had come home. And it was a real undoing moment for me. Like, yes, it's been messy ever since then and kind of walked stuff out and had to have healing. But there was that moment of, this is where I belong. There's something in this for me. Yeah. And it was a really powerful experience that I still get now when I walk through church. There is something in me that goes, I'm home. This is it. This is family. So I think for me, it was that moment of like, everything changed when I really realized that this was home for me.
I think that is so powerful, because it's this sense of homecoming. And as you're speaking, I'm reminded of that famous story, that the prodigal son, that homecoming, that running into the arms of God. And it's not just about the running, but it's knowing that those arms are open for you. And I think that's the key of that story. And for us in our journey and our discipleship is not just about making the journey back to God, but knowing that his arms are open for you and for me and for anyone else. And I think that's so, so powerful. Yeah, so good. And look at you now, you're now an ordinand in the Church of England. And that's what I love. I love how God does that though, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's taken you and he's healing you and he's forming you. And look at you, you're now a front runner for the Church of England. I think that's so exciting. And the story and the way you live your life will be so different to how it was before. And that is something you carry into your ministry. And that's why I think you can only be effective in your ministry, because you can empathize and you can reach out and can walk in the shoes of others who have lost in the same way that you have. And I think that makes that so powerful. What can you say to us? Anything that you can help us with to say, this is what I've done to stay free, and when I'm not free, these are my triggers, so I know how to get back to that place.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think my experience it's been a process and an ongoing one. Like, I'm definitely not a done deal, right? I figured this will be the rest of my life. I think the moment I realized that God was real, he was nice, he liked me, like all the classic things we hear people tell us, for me, it was a choice to throw myself upon God, that actually he would be my first port of call, that there would be, messy nights in my room, worship music blaring, while I am crying and sobbing to God as my father. And the more I've done that, the deeper that relationship's gone, the more intimate that's become, where actually I do know him to be my good provider. I know that he is there. I have this like real security that I am his little girl. And I used to hear people say stuff like that and be like, never, that's just not going to happen. Yeah. And now I'm like, I get it. But it was a process. It was a process of kind of trusting him. And I guess just like prayer and talking to him was kind of my key thing. I also, at church, I would always go up for ministry. And I kind of didn't worry what everyone else was doing around me. I didn't care what the call to ministry was. I was going up there to do business with God. And so I would go, and it didn't even matter if someone prayed for me or not. I just let go. There were a couple of really profound prayer ministry moments, I'd say. One was that I used to have a mentor in the church, and I used to avoid her on a Sunday evening. I was just carrying quite a lot of guilt and anger about my dad. And I didn't really know what to do with it. I tried to pray about it by myself, hadn't worked. And I just saw her husband go up to her and say something. They both looked at me, and I remember thinking, no, stay away.
Yeah,
And they came over and he said, look, I really think I've got a word of knowledge for you. And so we went over to the side of the church and they started praying for me, and God just did something powerful in that moment. This kind of anger that I was feeling came out, it was expressed, and it was really freeing. So I think part of it is prayer ministry, of training people who know how to pray and can do that, but also in the absolute solitude of my own room, in my house, door closed, one-on-one. I would say that's kind of been really key. And then the other thing I would say is I learned to rebuild trust in friendships. And, you know, my friends are like family to me. They really are. And I think one of the deepest joys and probably one of the most healing things has been watching like my male friends become dads themselves and them like absolutely doting. And I think there's been a real choice by them to really bring me into family. And so I see when it goes wrong. You know, I'm there when it's, you know, the kid is having a meltdown, the parent's having a meltdown. I'm in those moments. They're not hiding them from me. And I will forever be grateful to those people for doing it. But I think for me, it was healing and also quite painful, because it was amazing to see, and it continues to be amazing to see. It's also painful because it really does magnitude what I didn't have and what I lost out on. But again, it's kind of bringing it back to God in those moments. So I think it's both, and I think it's people who you have friendship and relationship and do life with, but also take it to God and really throw yourself upon him.
Yeah, that's so good, Kirstine. I think what I'm hearing actually is it's almost like the word position. It's like putting ourselves in front of God, obviously for relationship with him, in front of others. You know, it is painful. Like, you know, for countless reasons, we have seasons where it's painful, but actually part of our healing does come in positioning ourselves that through those people, through those relationships, and through God himself, that he will come in and meet us. And that this void that's created by a trauma in childhood or countless other things, you know, can be healed and God can meet, but it be only when we position ourselves in a place where we want to be healed. Actually, I think that's the thing. So I didn't say this earlier, but it's just come back to mind, is that at that conference, again I mentioned it in here, but you know, the lady that was preaching was outstanding. She was outstanding. I can't tell you what she was preaching about, because the only bit I heard was, now we're going to pray for the fatherless. And I was like, well, that's not why I came. I've come to a women's conference to talk about women's things. I'm not talking about being fatherless. And so it's that sense of, I had to lean into that. I had to go, okay, God, this is the moment. This is like another slab of healing. And I could have run away, but like you, I was like, okay, everything in me wants to run away, but I know it's good for me to press into God and position myself in a place where it's safe, like you rightly say, with prayer ministry, in churches, you know, having that covering in spiritual families, as it were, to really embrace that healing that is afforded to us as we put ourselves in those places. So I think that's really helpful, Kirst. So helpful. Thank you so much. I just wondered, in closing, would you please finish the phrase less is more?
Yeah, it's actually a really hard phrase to finish, I have to say, but I think for me, I was like, less is more, because God is my security. So where there was a lack of security, there was a lack of, you know, just knowing that there was a dad who had my back. For me, I know without doubt God is that for me. He's got it. He's always got the best for me. He's got a perfect plan worked out. But I think there's a level of security that gives me confidence then to go on and chase my dreams, or go for things, or put myself forward for options, and, you know, forward for opportunities, because he has got it. And for me, that really has come from a place of actually not having that in an earthly sense.
That's so good. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing everything you shared. You're awesome. I'm so pleased you're in my life. We've known each other for a few years now, haven't we? So it's so exciting just to build on that through doing college together and other things. So you're a joy. You're an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your time. Loads of love to you, and hopefully I will see you soon. Take care.
Thanks.